Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior and well respected professional from the world of academia, from Perth, Australia, Professor Samuel Makinda. Professor Makinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
Thank you. Professor Makinda is Professor Emeritus of International Relations and Security Studies at the College of Law and Arts and Social Sciences at Murdoch University, Perth, Western Australia. He was earlier a senior journalist with the Weekly Review and the Nation group of the newspapers in Nairobi. And he has been recognized or awarded by former Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki as one of the elders of the Order of the Burning Spear. So, Samuel, my first question for you. You began your career as a journalist before transitioning into academia. Tell me about your journey and what motivated the shift.
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. I didn't make a major shift as such. I was fascinated as a young man. I was
Mm,
fascinated by ideas and theories,
mm,
and I wanted to write and share my knowledge with
mm,
other people.
mm.
So I found newspapers were very attractive
Yeah.
as a place to work. I trained as a journalist, but mainly I focus mainly on print media. I
Hmm.
didn't enjoy working in broadcast, well, in I would say electronic media at the time, which was either TV or radio.
Yeah.
So uh, I worked for newspapers. I enjoyed it, but I didn't have sufficient time to research the things I wanted to write about.
Mm,
So I decided that perhaps academia would be the best place
mm,
to go
mm.
if I wanted to have more room, more space, and more time to do my research and publish.
Very
So I
interesting.
didn't actually shift as such because even after I became an academic, I continued to write in the newspapers. In fact,
Mm.
I've published more than 2,000
Wow.
articles in newspapers in Australian, New Zealand, and Kenyan newspapers
Mm.
since I became an academic. And in
Wow.
fact, from 2007 to
Hmm.
the middle of 2012, I had my own column in a Kenyan newspaper called Business Daily.
Hmm.
So I was writing every Friday. And so I'm in both academia and journalism as
Very
such.
interesting. But as someone who has studied and taught across continents, how has your global exposure shaped your perspective on Africa's place in the world?
Well, that's a very important question. I would say my exposure to a number of African countries and the UK and the US, some parts of Asia, India, China, Japan, and of course Australia, where I live. My exposure to these countries has given me both hope and despair
Mm,
about Africa's place in the world.
mm.
Now, when I talk about Africa, Africa is a big continent.
Yeah,
We have 54 countries.
yeah.
If you add Western Sahara, perhaps 55 countries. So it's difficult to summarize what is
Mm,
happening in each
yeah.
of those African countries. But I've toured a number of African countries, and I'm gratified to see that we have young people who are very enthusiastic, who are very hopeful about
Mm,
what they hope to do.
mm,
And when I look at the populations of many of these countries, I find that the average age of most countries in Africa is actually 24 or lower than 24.
mm.
So we still have young people who are very
Correct,
enthusiastic, who are very hopeful. So
correct.
that gives me hope. But at the same time, we have uh, people who are in power, those who control the levers of power, political power especially,
Mm,
have become almost like thieves, in the sense that they want to steal as much from their own governments as possible.
Yeah.
And so corruption sometimes fills me with a sense of despair.
Correct.
But I look at the younger people and have hope. And I believe
Absolutely.
that Africa is in the future going to be a wonderful place to live in.
Oh, absolutely. And as a lot of people have said, Africa is the last frontier of growth for the world. Other than the demographic dividend of young people under the age of 24 in Africa, which you just told us about, what are some of the other key drivers of Africa's emerging economic strength?
Yeah, again, we come to this creature called Africa.
Mm.
If Ashutosh, if you are looking at Africa from the perspective of former Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah,
Yeah,
wanted to unite the whole of Africa and work together to even plow the Sahara and water it until it produced goods for the rest of the
correct.
the
Correct.
world. If
Correct.
you're looking at Africa from that perspective, Africa is different. If you're looking at it from the perspective of this young military, Burkinabe
Mm.
military leader, Ibrahim Traore,
Mm.
was come up and he wants to change the relationship of his country with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
If you're looking at it, it's a different Africa. If you're looking at Africa from the perspective of, say, the Kenyan president, William Ruto, who, after visiting Washington last year, I think 2024, and Kenya was, I think, he was one of the first leaders of Africa to be given a state visit, to be invited there for a state visit. After that, Kenya was pronounced a major non-NATO ally of the United States.
Mm.
So when you're looking at all these countries, they are different. And when we negotiate with African countries,
Yeah.
again, we negotiate with different leaders.
Oh, absolutely.
So I would say the main levers, levers of hope
Mm.
in these countries, as I said, are the youth, but also
Mm.
we have a lot of minerals
Yeah,
still in the ground, which can be exploited to benefit the country, the people of Africa.
correct. Correct.
But as of now, many of these resources are being used for the selfish ends
Mm.
of some political leaders.
Yeah.
Take a country like the Democratic Republic of Congo,
Mm.
where we have all kinds of mineral resources that one may be looking for. I remember a few months ago when the leaders of Rwanda and Congo met in Washington to sign a contract for the US to help them exploit those resources. I was interviewed on the BBC, and the interviewer asked me why I didn't start by criticizing the United States for stealing Africa's resources and whatnot there. And I said, well, those resources are being stolen by African leaders to be sold outside, not to help the Zari African people.
Correct.
We criticize it when it's an American getting in for also selfish reasons to benefit from that.
Correct.
But we look aside when African leaders in East Africa are exploiting those resources.
Correct.
To sell to Middle Eastern countries and whatnot there. We keep quiet as if actually that benefits Africa. It doesn't.
Correct.
So my argument was that if anybody who steps there is going to help the people of Congo enjoy their human rights, if they're going to help construct infrastructure and protect those women from rape and other problems they face, I think that is something that I will welcome. And then after that, we can talk about what we can do.
I
with
agree.
those resources.
No, I realize my question was a little unfair because I've clubbed 54 countries or 55 countries into one question. But as a whole region, there's a lot of digital innovation and technology happening. Uh, where do you see progress? I know the four East African countries are far more progressive as compared to a lot of the other part in central and western parts of Africa. I'd love to get your perspective on where do you believe technology holds the greatest potential for growth?
Well, I think technology holds a lot of ground or provides the major means for progress in Africa, in many parts of Africa, including East Africa. You talked
Mm,
about East Africa. I originally come from Kenya,
yeah.
and Kenyan scientists were the first to create a system for transferring money
Mm,
through mobile phones.
yeah.
They call it M-Pesa.
Yeah.
M-Pesa was invented by young Kenyans. So they were quite advanced in
True.
that.
True.
I remember talking to the former Minister for Finance who said that big banks begged him not to permit that technology to
Mm,
come into operation.
yeah.
And he said, well, he called the young men who are working on it, and they used it so he could send money to his own uh, workers on the farm. They were
Correct.
able to confirm they got the
Mm,
money. And he said, what is wrong with this?
mm,
So they went ahead and developed M-Pesa. Now, Vodafone
correct.
bought the majority share in Safaricom in Kenya,
Yeah.
and I think it has taken that technology globally. So technology is something we have to look up to.
Absolutely.
It,
I agree. I agree.
unfortunately, we can't tell where it's going to take us. I'll tell you a story. When I was a civil servant in Canberra, 1985, I was working in the Parliament House, writing reports every now and again, and they invited somebody to talk to us about new technology. This person said, this digital technology is coming. We shall use the machines to do many of the things that we want to do. And he told us, you will have so much leisure time, you will not know what to do with it.
Mm,
And this person was paid a lot of money. He was telling us lies because we have this technology. I
mm.
never have time to rest.
Yeah.
There's no leisure time that he promised. So sometimes we have this technology. It
Correct.
enables us to do certain things, but
Correct.
we can't precisely predict what is going to happen in the next
Absolutely.
5 or
Great
10 years.
response. I agree. My next question is how significant is the role of women in Africa's economic transformation? And where do you see barriers that need to be addressed?
Well, I think women have traditionally played a very important role in African
Correct.
societies, but that role was interfered with through colonialism.
Yeah.
Now, women are again beginning to play an important role, particularly with the availability of cheap mobile phones
Mhm.
and also the introduction of this mobile banking system. Women have started playing a much better role,
Mm,
much bigger role than they were doing, say, 10 or 20 years ago.
mm,
But the rules that we have governing women
mm,
in African countries
mm,
are still backward. So unless there is a major development in, unless there's reform in the legal, political, and social measures that govern activities of men and women in Africa, African women are continuing to suffer, not
mm,
because they're not capable.
mm,
It's because we have bad rules, because we have bad laws, we have bad political structures
mm.
that want to disadvantage women instead of giving them opportunities
Right.
for growth.
Right. Well said. Well said. And if you were to forecast the next 20 years, where do you see Africa's biggest breakthroughs?
Well, Africa's biggest breakthroughs again will be probably through technology
Hmm.
and through the resources that African countries themselves generate.
Right.
Now, as I said, it's very hard to tell what is going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years,
Mm.
but I have a lot of faith in the youth in Africa.
Absolutely.
Uh, the Gen Zs and the millennials and whatnot there, those people are thinking ahead,
Mm.
but we have a structure which is holding them back. This structure is controlled by corrupt politicians. As we talk, the Gen Zs are still working hard to
Yeah.
try to change the situation, to uh, create a better society for themselves.
Mm.
And you have seen perhaps the situation in Madagascar, where the former
Yeah.
president is now perhaps in somewhere in hiding.
Mm.
It's because Gen Zs stood in the
Correct.
way. They did the same thing in Kenya,
Yeah.
but uh, they were more or less overpowered when the man who has just died in India this
Mm.
week came in from the opposition, came in and sided with the government, and therefore they suppressed the young people. Well, I don't know what program the young people had, but they were
Mm.
opposed to a finance bill which was going to tax people who have no means of paying the taxes,
Mm.
and that is how they
Great
started
response. Great
to
response. Thank you. Thank you. Let's now talk about the Africa-India relations. And historically, there's been a very close bond between India and most of the African countries. How would you, Professor, from your perspective, describe the historical foundations of relations between several countries of Africa and India?
Well, it's a good question. India has had close relations with some parts of Africa, particularly Eastern Africa.
Yeah,
If you take into account Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
Tanzania. Yeah.
I know that when I mention Uganda, people are going to look back to the early 1970s when
Mm.
uh, the general in Uganda, General Idi Amin,
Yeah.
took power and decided to send away
A lot of
most
Indians, I know.
Indians. Most of them ended up in Kenya, others went to the UK, Canada, Australia,
Yeah,
and possibly other places.
correct.
But I think they have more or less made a comeback. And so the point I'm making here is that there has been a relationship between India and Eastern Africa for quite some
Mm.
time. Now,
Mm.
when it comes to the, uh, the relationship between India as a state and some African countries, again, they have a common experience that these people shared under British rule.
Mm.
After all, the company
Yeah.
that colonized East
Mm.
Africa, the chartered British East Africa Company, was
Mm.
an offshoot of the chartered company in India, which controlled India,
Mm.
and so there has been a shared experience between India and some African countries,
Mm.
and beyond that historical connection that I'm talking about, Mahatma Gandhi played a very important role
Correct.
in raising consciousness, national consciousness
Mm.
in much of Africa.
Yeah.
Um, he lived in South Africa and made an impact there.
Mm.
When I was growing up, most of the things we learned about politics and nationalism were traced through the work of Mahatma
Mahatma
Gandhi.
Gandhi.
At the
Absolutely.
University of Nairobi,
Mm.
where I studied for my first degree, in fact, it was the only university, we just called it the university.
Mm.
At the University of Nairobi, the main uh, library is called, to this day, is called Mahatma Gandhi Library.
Mm.
And we have an administration wing, probably it's no longer an administration wing, but we should refer to it as the Gandhi wing. So
Wow.
Gandhi left a strong impact on
Mm.
Africans, even
Absolutely.
in places where he didn't live, like
Mm.
Ghana. The uh, the former Ghanaian leader, independence leader Kwame Nkrumah,
Mm.
uh, copied the tactics that Mahatma Gandhi had used
Correct.
against the British in South Africa and India to
Correct.
try to fight colonialism through what he called positive protest or something like that. So there's that connection. But also, if you look at the colonial system, we have similar, we have a common law between,
Yeah.
I mean, most of the former British colonies adopted a system of law called the common law, and India has that. So our lawyers trained in India will have no problems working in East Africa.
Absolutely.
And that's why many of our youngsters go to train in India with the modern facilities and whatnot.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's that connection. There's that historical connection. But at the moment now, of course, India has become one of the great powers.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't talk about itself in those terms, but the fact that India's wealth is perhaps 5 times that of the UK has not been noticed by many people.
Yeah.
It's because it's not listed among the group of 7. When the group of 7 was established, they said the 7 most industrialized or most developed countries. When China when China reached that stage, they didn't just call it developed countries, they said democracies.
Correct.
Now, with India, which is a democracy, and also more developed, the name has changed.
Yeah.
So you can see what the world is like.
Absolutely.
But India,
I agree with you.
India has played a very important role in even shaping the foreign policies or helping shape the foreign policies of developing countries through non-alignment.
Yeah.
So
that is true.
Through non-alignment and through BRICS and all these other things.
Correct.
So I would say India is now the power to watch.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, in the last G20, India played a big role in inviting Africa or a representative from Africa to the G20 as well. So that was a very significant move. But I have time for 2 more questions for you, Professor Makinda. In comparison to China, which is very, very deeply engaged in several African countries, how does India's approach differ? And what advantages or disadvantages do you see in that approach?
Well, I think India has a better approach to African countries than China. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm talking to you as an Indian, but I would say the experience that India went through as a colony has helped sensitize its leaders to the way powerful countries or rich countries treat poorer countries. China didn't have that experience.
Correct.
So China's approach to Africa is different from that of India. And I would not be surprised if in the next few decades, I'm not predicting, but I'm just saying that what is going on with the China giving a lot of support, giving a lot of loans to build infrastructure, and then controlling this country's economies the way it's doing, people might start protesting against China the way they protested against the colonial powers. So this is why I say that India's sensitivity to colonial control has shaped its policy to Africa to be different from that of China, which didn't have the same experience and which engages in activities that lead people to complain that, oh, now even the train tickets on our train is issued by, is administered by the Chinese. And that now there are so many other things they complain about. So I would say China may learn and say, let us do things differently.
Mm.
It might learn from India, or it might learn from somewhere else. But
Correct.
at the moment, it's not exhibiting the sensitivity that most rich countries would exhibit when they are dealing with the poorer countries.
Amazing. And my last question for you, sir. Do you believe cultural exchanges and diaspora links are being fully leveraged in Africa-India relations? Or do you think more work needs to be done?
Well, I would find it very difficult to answer that question because I haven't got the numbers to show the extent to which the diaspora, particularly the Indian diaspora
Mm.
in East Africa, and the Africans who have been to India have done to
Mm.
influence policies.
Yeah.
But I would say culture has been very important.
Yeah.
I grew up eating certain things I which I thought were African
Mm.
until I was an adult and I learned that actually these things came from India.
Mm.
So the if we're talking about culture, we're talking about language, we're talking
Correct.
about food, we're talking about many other things that
Yeah.
actually we participate in on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
Mm.
And I would say the cultural connection between between India and East Africa is there, particularly because of the colonial legacy, but
Mm.
also because um, Indian uh, businesses have consciously decided that they can uh, leverage their knowledge to establish good connections with East African
Mm.
countries. But I don't have the figures
No,
to
I agree.
answer
I
your
agree.
question.
I agree. But on that note, Professor Makinda, I just want to say, a conversation with you on Africa can be, timeless. It can just carry on and on and on because of your amazing understanding of not just Kenya, but and not just East Africa, but all the 54 countries of Africa. But I do have a constraint of time. But so maybe I'll ask you again at some stage in a few months to talk to me again. But thank you for talking to me about your amazing journey. Thank you for talking to me about some of the amazing opportunities in Africa. In India, we've often say we have a demographic dividend of the young in India. You have the same benefits in Africa. You have some amazing amount of unexplored mineral wealth which hopefully will be used for the benefit of Africans in each of the countries that the wealth exists in. Thank you also for giving me some perspectives on the relations between India and Africa. Thank you again and good luck to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.